Good morning, everybody. We'll be just getting started in a moment. Okay, good morning, everybody. And just while there's a few other people joining us, thank you for joining us this morning for our session around finding the perfect technology partner. Is there more to consider than just cost? So just to run through some housekeeping rules, just to say that this session is being recorded and that it will be available on demand on the Heart Square website afterwards. As you will see, there is a Q&A box. So this is for any questions that you have for Cameron or myself. We really do want this session to be as interactive as possible, although it is virtual. But please do put in any questions that you have. We will get through as many of them as we can on the session, and any that we don't get to cover. Cameron has also very nicely agreed that he will share his contact details afterwards so he can follow up any questions that anybody has. There's also a chat box, and this is for any technical or support questions or general questions for Heart Square on the running of the session. So my colleague Rebecca is in the background and she will be keeping an eye on that. And then just finally checking that your microphone is on mute. So I'm Joyce Harmon. I'm Senior Client Relationship Manager with Heart Square, and I'm absolutely delighted that I have with me this morning Cameron Wright from FEMS. And Cameron, would you like to just do a quick introduction, please?
Yeah, certainly. Hi, everybody. My name's Cameron Wright. I'm a Programme Manager at the Federation of European Microbiological Societies. That's a not-for-profit association of European microbiological societies. So we have 57 member societies across 30 plus countries. And we basically support the microbiological community with grants, organising events, and we seek to promote the study of microbiology in policy and in the wider public sphere.
Perfect, thank you. So really this slide is just to, for those of you who don't know Heart Square, just to say that we work only in the not-for-profit sector and have been doing so for a number of years. And importantly, that we are independent. So of any technology provider or any technology, we are absolutely independent and impartial. So I'm just going to run a quick poll. So if you bear with me while I bring this up, really what we want to do is just to help us see what stage you're at of who's joined us this morning. So if you could just fill this in. So we're looking at things like what stage are you at? Are you seeking to get more information? Are you at the strategy stage? Are you running your requirements gathering? Have you been there, done that, finished your project? So if you, I'll just give this another few seconds. The minute we've definitely got, oh no, as I say that, it's changed. I was going to say we had a 50-50 between information gathering and requirements gathering, but actually that's changed a bit. So I'll just give that one more second. And great, I'm going to end the poll and let me share the results with everybody. So I think it's quite an interesting split. So that there's the vast majority are between that sort of information gathering stage, requirements gathering phase. So trying to understand what it is you need, what you're going to go out to market with. Then quite a few who are going out to market and some who are implementing already. And I think it's interesting that nobody has said agreeing the strategy. So I think that's hopefully a positive thing that, for those of you that are at that information gathering stage, you're very clear on what the strategy is you're working against. So that's really good. So if I stop sharing those. So today I've sort of broken down the topic into sort of three key areas, and this is just really based on sort of what we see on the projects that we run. So the requirements gathering phase, and as a lot of you have said, you're at that phase from the poll. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. Then on to the invitation to tender stage, or the ITT. This often can be called an RFP process, request for proposal, or an RFQ process, a request for quotation. But in essence, all it is, that stage is where you're going out to market, engaging with technology providers in order for them to come back and quote against your piece of work. But in this instance, we'll be referring it to as an invitation to tender. And then kind of that third phase, which is the selection process. We at R-Square use what we call a highly engaged model because of various different steps in it. We'll go into that in a bit more detail, but really just looking at the things you need to consider when you're in that selection phase. So firstly, looking at requirements gathering, and people, they always say, where do we start? So this is all about reaching out across the whole organization, across the people that are going and departments that are going to be using whatever this new technology is. It might be that you're looking to implement a new CRM, a new CMS or website, a new learning management system. There can be endless different bits of technologies, but regardless of what the technology is, we would say the approach needs to be the same. So reaching out across the whole organization to understand what their needs are. Very often with clients, what they'll say is, but we know what we need. But the reality is very often when you go in and start doing requirements gathering, things will come out and be uncovered that people hadn't realized. So that's why it's very important that you have the breadth across the organization to understand and make sure that you haven't missed anything. Something that's very useful to do if you have the time and capacity to do it is to carry out a business process review at the start of the project, kind of as a baseline, I would really say, because what you're trying to do is understand, what processes have you got in place? Are there any inefficiencies in them? Are they actually just really simple and they work and they don't need to change? But it's about understanding how you do things to make sure that you don't bring any bad or inefficient processes into any new technology or new system. Once you've done those requirements gathering workshops, and they are quite intensive, because you're having to gather a lot of information and get things out of people's heads, there's going to be crossover across departments, and that's absolutely normal and to be expected. So what you need to do is to deduplicate the requirements so that you're getting a cohesive list of all of the requirements across the organization. Really using this as a collaborative approach. So getting staff bought in right from the start. So for those of you who have been on webinars before with me will always know that I do say, for a project, you cannot do a project at people. It must be done with people. You want people to feel a sense of ownership. You want people to feel involved. You want to feel that they have had a say on their requirements, because ultimately they're the people that will be using the system once it's been implemented, and you want them to use it. And very often, if they haven't been included in the process, their enthusiasm might not be what you need. And then finally, sorting out the priorities, the really, really obvious one, but agreeing what is essential. So the requirements are going to be very varied, and there can be an awful lot of them. And everybody's going to have a different view on what is a priority. So going back to the point of on the poll where nobody had said they're working on the strategy, that's great, because hopefully you have a very clearly defined what is the strategy for the organization, what is the strategy for this project, what are the benefits we are trying to achieve by carrying out this piece of work. So very much keeping that in mind when you're agreeing the priorities, because it may be a case, and is very often the case, that either for budget reasons or for resourcing reasons, or for, it can be many different reasons, that the project is going to have to be done in a phased approach. So agreeing what is phase one, what is phase two, but again, making sure that people are aware that if their requirements are not going to be met for phase two, they are told that, they know why, and they're bought into it. Looking then at the invitation to tender. So this is, it's your document that is going to go out to market to the technology partners to say, this is what we would like you to quote against. It might sound very obvious to say, put in some background to your organization. Yes, of course, they're going to look at your website. They're going to read up and find out as much as they can about you. But it's interesting to put in some of the nuances about you. What is it that makes you different from other charities or membership bodies or trade unions and whatever type of organization that you are? Putting in some narrative around those strategies and goals and the benefits that you expect to get from the project, because you want them to buy into them, because they should be looking to not just deliver the technology, but deliver a technology that will bring those benefits. So if you haven't made them aware of that, then they're not going to be in the same sort of mindset as you. So putting in that is really, really important. Having a clearly defined set of requirements, as we've said on the previous slide, putting that in. Highlighting system integrations really often gets forgotten. So for example, you might be doing a CRM project and you needed to integrate with the website and possibly the finance system, or it might be, you know, an LMS or something like that. So highlighting the different systems it will need to integrate with, because there is implications on cost, and this is what people often forget. So if you're going to integrate the CRM into the website, who is taking responsibility for those costs? Is there a cost on the website provider side? Is there a cost on the CRM provider side? Making clear so that you don't come to a situation later where people say, I didn't know that I was going to have to pay for that, or I thought and presumed that that was part of the CRM technology partner's quote. So being very clear what any integrations are so that you can have a clear map of who's responsible for doing them and what the costs are associated with them. Ensure you have a clear definition between the must-haves and the nice-to-haves. So the must-haves is what we must need for go live. The nice-to-haves are things that possibly, you know, we could have in phase 2. But the reason to make sure they're in the document at this stage is a technology partner may turn around and say, you know what, you've got this as a nice to have, but with our technology, that really wouldn't be a major thing or actually an extra cost to you if we did it now. So if you hadn't put it in, they wouldn't know that. Asking open questions. So it's not just about asking them to do a tick box exercise to say, yes, I can do XYZ requirement. You want to understand, yes, of course, they can meet your requirements, but how are they going to meet them? And then being very clear on what the milestones for the project is. So the dates for when the responses are, the dates for when the engagement meetings are going to be, the dates for the demonstrations, and the date of roughly when you think, or in your mind, the discovery phase of the project for the implementation is going to be. I'm going to go through these quite quickly, but just some points around making the partner selection process as effective as possible. Sharing your mission and cause with them. So a lot of technology partners, they have chosen to work only in the not-for-profit space for, you know, the reasons because they care about the causes like you. So sharing your mission and your cause with them is very important. Asking them to contribute to your future state. So the point around that is, don't just be thinking about this as a just solely this project. Thinking about that this is going to be a long-term partner. What else can they do to help us and benefit us as an organization as we go forward? Being open and honest about the goals and priorities of the project. And I think the point here is about saying, you know, we have concerns about our capacity to deliver this. We have concerns about the timelines that are put in. Can we do this? By having those conversations early on, then they're aware and they can then make suggestions around, does the timeline need to be increased, or what extra capacity and support could they provide? Different things like that. You might have an idea of the approach you want to take, and that's fine, but be open to different approaches. Being open to that dialogue, to listen to the different suggestions of approaches that technology partners have, because, you know, and hopefully you would not be doing, for example, a new CRM implementation every couple of years. This should be something you're only doing, you know, not very often. But for the technology partners, they're doing this day in and day out. So they have got great knowledge and experience, and use that, build on it. Then the other point's about, you know, getting them to show what their technology is capable of, not just against the list of requirements that you have, but what future scope is there? Let them demonstrate their experience and their value to you. And then the final point really on that is around, very often around budget, what will happen is the responses will come back in, and then people will say, well, the budget they've come up with is what we said our budget was. And so therefore all they've done is said, well, you said it's this, so we've made it match that. And that's not the case. What the technology partners are trying to do is give as much value for the budget that you have. We all know in this sector that, you know, budget is a huge challenge, and it's about them wanting to give you as much value for money, but not being afraid to challenge and ask, you know, how has that budget been come up, but how is it broken down? So don't take a cynical view that if, strangely enough, the budget comes in around what you were thinking, it's not because they've worked backwards from the budget. It's actually they're trying to give you the best that they can. I'm not going to go through this in great detail. This is the Heart Square approach that we use. We call it, you know, the highly engaged model, and it's kind of a 9-step process. But really what we mean by this is, as you can see, there's lots of different stages. So lots of engagement meetings, lots of demonstrations, and also really importantly, that point 6 around governance and reference checks. Very, very important to do that throughout the process. Do not wait until you get to the end and then suddenly thinking about, okay, we should go off and do this now. because you might end up choosing somebody and thinking we want to go with them, and then something comes up in the governance checks. So doing that really early on. So the point of this to show is that it is not a case of issue your ITT, get a response in, and then make a decision. Use a much more engaged model. Take that time. It is very involved, but it is worth it. And then finally, just some sort of final considerations to think about when you're getting to that final decision stage. So cultural fit, really important. Do you like them? You're going to be working with them for a very, very, very long time. Do you feel that you can work with them? Interestingly, we had Catherine Wilson from the Home Builders Federation on a session with us a couple of months ago, and she made a comment that at the start of the process, they actually didn't like their technology partner. But because they went through that model of meeting them lots of different times, that they chose them, because through that process they realized, actually, you know what, they are a good cultural fit. We really like them, and they're really, really happy that they chose them. But that had they not gone through that whole stage, they might have discounted them early on. So cultural fit is a really, really important one. Then around relevant experience, again, it's an obvious one. Have they worked with similar organizations to you? Have you got any considerations around sensitive data? Do you hold, children's data? What kind of information do you hold? Is there security considerations around that? Have you got restrictions on where your data has to be held? Has it to be held in the UK? Can it be held in Europe or America? Is there things around that? Asking those questions. Then on the proposed implementation approach, how do they work? Are they suggesting an agile approach, a waterfall approach, or what do they even mean by that? Just so you're clear, so you know that approach is going to work for you. And then finally, budget. I know we have said that this is all not just about budget, but it is a big one. So having a clear understanding of how they have come to the budget, how it is broken down, what are the different costs for the different stages of the project. So enough from me. So I'm going to bring in Cameron. So Cameron, can you give us just a little brief overview of FEMS and what you do?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. So I'll start with FEMS first, and then I'll work back to me, so to speak. So as I said, FEMS is a not-for-profit. It's an association of various European microbiological societies. So our members are member societies, and we provide their members with member benefits in terms of accessing grants, awards. We run events. We organise academic journals. And our goal basically is to connect microbiologists together to share their science and to support them throughout their careers. I'm one of the program managers. I primarily have a focus on governance and working with our board of directors, who are the senior management of the organisation. But over the last few years, I have been head project lead on our CRM development project.
Perfect. Doing lots of things, really.
A jack of all trades.
Absolutely. But a master of many, I would say, not a master of none. So can you tell us just a little bit about, the project itself? So, what was it you were setting out to do? And, what were the drivers for change?
Yeah, so I think the drivers for change, I think FEMS, like many not-for-profit, many organizations, historically has relied on rather ad hoc tools to do a lot of its work. And I think over the last several years, we've increasingly become aware that the tools that we use aren't matching what we want to achieve in the future, or even really optimal for conducting our work at this time. The classic 101 Excel files, 101 different software types, and not knowing a member that sits on one database spreadsheet is the same person that sits on the other. And then also in terms of our website, it's WordPress, it's quite old, and we have had several feedback from many member societies that the features that we offer aren't really keeping up with what they would demand in terms of membership fees. So it was really a sort of two-pronged issue there. it's the whole data management issue, the sort of single source of truth, and also to be able to expand the features that we can offer our member societies, and what we can more do in-house as well. So we kind of came to the view that we were looking for the whole package, for want of a better expression. We were looking to have a CRM system, which FEMS has never had. Also linking in or an integration with a new website. And also in addition to that, because we are a member society, led organization, we're really looking also for that sort of online portal platform to be able to engage the community in a long-term thing, more than just, oh, we email or issue a newsletter now and then. So yes, we were looking for a kind of a total package, sort of integrated solution.
Fantastic, thanks. And as you know, say some very common challenges that I'm sure lots of people on the session this morning will absolutely resonate with. And and particularly that bit of the member needs, what the members want, and supporting the members. Yeah, absolutely. So requirements gathering. So as we know, it's a very involved process. How did you break down the requirements and sort of priorities, to have that balance between what you need and the wishes of the team?
Yeah, and as you were saying, and as everyone probably on the webinar knows, it is a difficult process, and it does take time. And I think what we were keen on focusing in on was focusing in on identifying needs, but as a way of focusing and identifying what we would want to do, or what we'd want the solution to be able to do in the future. Not as an initial potentially phase one thing, but we were wanting to buy or work with a tech partner to produce something that we could use now and in the future. And I think we kind of started that approach in terms of grounding it as much as possible in our strategy goals. So we have strategy goals, as many organizations have. We kind of started that process with a discussion with the board of directors, also to kind of gain that sort of initial buy-in from senior management. But we're kind of focusing in there on what were the wants and needs in terms of FEMS's future goals and aims. What did we want to do in several years' time? Because as much as we could marry the technology selection to achieving those longer term goals, then it's more bang for your buck, and it's the more important. What I think what we considered was that the outcomes of that and that strategy part, which many of the people on the webinar are in process, we kind of use that as our sort of anchor. And that was a really useful way of, when we got down into the details, to define if we had many needs or requirements. The way that we tried to prioritize them was, how did they fit into achieving the longer term strategy? Because many needs can be achieved by just changing a process. It doesn't necessarily need to be that the technology achieves that. So we kind of use that as an initial buy-in from the board, and to kind of set these are the sort of essentials in their most sort of reasonably abstract form. We weren't getting into detail of it needed to do X, Y, and Z. And then following up from that, we really wanted to engage the team as quickly as possible and buy them in from the start. We, along with, we employed Heart Square with this to help support basically arranging discussions. So discussions with the team overall, in terms of trying to get a sense of what they wanted or what they felt we needed in terms of to be able to achieve the things in their particular areas of expertise. And then we also broke that down into also having meetings with the individual teams, so like events, so like comms. And we tried to take that process of that holistic process, rather than just say, okay, what do you guys need? What's bugging you at the moment type thing? We wanted to kind of we had a really in-depth chat about what the teams did at the moment, what the problems they were experiencing now, and what they wanted to do in the future. And I think having that process it was really helpful in terms of, we went into it, for example, the communication team, they went into it at the start going like, it takes forever to issue newsletters, it takes forever to do X and Y, and those are problems that we would want the technology to solve. But as we went through that process, and it did take a while to kind of break down in that approach, linking that with what the kind of overall priority aims were from the strategy, you could see those sort of deduplicating requirements. So I remember the start of the comms discussion, it was very much of we need the technology to be able to speed up X, Y, and Z because it takes forever. But actually, as we progressed, what the main goal that came out of that, and it was a sort of light bulb moment for everybody, was it wasn't the speed per se, it was the fact that FEMS as an organization doesn't really know the member or the stakeholder that they're communicating with. We need more, the aim that the system should solve is to provide that single source of the truth. It's the holistic individual, because if we know more about the individual themselves, we will be able to do more efficient, targeted communication with it. And I think working with an external provider is really important during that session, or we felt that it was quite important during that session, because again, they could ask those sort of outsider questions to kind of like tease, okay, right, you say it's that's the issue, but what's the source of those issues? And I think between that, we kind of got to develop a sort of an ITT package that had the overall aims based on the board discussion, and then breaking it down into basically the features that we wanted. But the features that we wanted weren't, oh, it needs to do X, Y, and Z faster. It was a distinct bullet point package of it needed to provide the single source of truth. And that way, I thought that sort of hierarchical approach, you could always point back up to where this decision or where this priority has came from. So if somebody came and said, look, why are we focusing in on an integrated website, for example, you could see the process that we'd taken, and everybody had been bought into that process from the start. So as I say, it takes a long period of time, but it's well worth it in the end to have a rounded package of requirements that you would go to seek tenders.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And I love that example about the communication thing, because I think it's very often, to your point, people start solutionizing the technology, and that's not what you need to be thinking about. It's that overarching, what is it that's missing here? What is it that we need to do? And not thinking about, this box must do this, or it must go faster. That's, ultimately, that's what any solution should fix. But it's, what are we really trying to achieve? So I think that's a really, really good point. So then, obviously we said, the next sort of early stage in the process of getting a new system is the selection process. So can you sort of describe how you did that process? How did you decide on the short list of partners that you were going to consider, and look at in more detail? So how did you go about that?
Yeah, so I think that, it was apparent from the requirements gathering that we were looking for a sort of an overall package. So we're talking CRM, website, and an online portal. I think the priority there was to see as broad a range of partners as we possibly could, because again, it was based on the fact that this is our first CRM. This is all new to us. So I think what became really important from both the board and the team was, yeah, to have a selection based on a broad range of little and large companies, companies that are European based and companies that are UK based, small, medium, not for profit, business wide. We wanted to see as broad a range as possible, and it was difficult trying to find or identify those individuals. So I think that was, we obviously sourced from fellow colleagues or fellow associations that had previous experience of them, as everyone does. We did a bit of our own initial research, but I think somebody, if you have a sort of external consultancy, they're really useful in being able to. So we got to the point where we'd made a list of, I think, 5 or 6 tech solutions that we could say were broadly different spectrums in the sort of technology partner solutions. But the Heartsquare were good in the sense of plugging that gap, if that makes sense, in the sense of, okay, right, you probably need to have somebody that's a slightly more business or the big package type thing, because again, you could focus in on selecting a partner that you think, well, I'll just select the one that just does solely for open source or not for profit sector. But I would encourage people to engage and let people tender for the ones that are broad ones, because you won't, I think, unless you go through the full process, you'll be, I think, well, we were certainly surprised at the technology partner that we selected, in terms of if we'd went with a strict criteria of, okay, right, let's just look at these individuals and that's it, then we wouldn't have ever seen that partner. So I think it was a bit of our research, but it was also a bit key, Heartsquare's or another consultancy, to be able to say, okay, spot the gap so that you can see as broad a range as you possibly can. So I think we got it down to like 4 or 5 in the end that were, yeah, tendered, and we had engagement meetings and, yeah, went to demo basically.
Perfect, thank you. And then obviously, cost, let's not pretend cost is a significant element of any decision, but were there any other elements for you that were part of that decision-making process?
Yeah, and I think this would come also from the sort of requirements phase, and it would kind of, we felt that it kind of flowed from that, but I think in terms of assessment and criteria, we were keen to, yeah, it's a big decision. There's 101 different factors that you can use to assess. I think the ITT or something is crucial to give you that sort of bedrock of, okay, right, these are the sort of function requirements, shall we say, of them. But there are the other considerations in terms of the referencing cost in the sort of fuller sense. I think for me, my sort of top 3 that I found at the end of the process were really important, where, yeah, fitting the requirements should fit what they're demonstrating in the fullest sense, as you were saying, both not just the specific thing, but we kind of allowed them to demonstrate what their vision was for certain features, because that's a really good way for them to show you the fullness of the technology. And many of the things that we picked weren't initially for the first phase, but we saw stuff that we might like, so we built that into future phases. But the 2 other most important things, the supplier experience of the area, so not-for-profits, organizations, we found really helped with the onboarding process. As you say, you're going to work with them for a long period of time. There'll be enough intricacies within your organization for them to have to learn. It's a benefit if they have worked with similar organizations or similar not-for-profits that have a similar issue. But I think the most important criteria that we found was their approach to the delivery. We we were going to work with them for a long period of time. So what was really vital that we really wanted to delve into in the engagement meetings and to a lesser extent in the demo meetings was what was their approach, what was their method, what was their responses on training, what was their responses on support, trying to have that as many opportunities as possible for to kind of get both what they say, right, we're going to do it in an agile process. Yes, okay, agile process, but also their face-to-face meetings, how they came across, and yeah, do you, as you said, do you like them? There was many that were very much we'll get this done X time, you tell us what it is, and we'll make it. That might work for some organizations, but yeah, finding that right fit is super important. So approach to delivery, I think, is a key consideration.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Then obviously once then you've chosen your partner, and what do you feel was really important on those sort of the crucial things to think about to really establish that relationship with them, because now you've chosen them and you're now, as you say, going to be starting working with them. So was there any sort of steps or considerations you had with building that relationship?
Yeah, I think there was a couple in the sense of so you've made the decision. I think for us it was key meetings and also meeting in person, face to face. So we we're based in the Netherlands. So many of the companies, obviously, when we were doing the engagement or the demo, it was via Zoom. What was really important was that as much as possible, we'd have face-to-face meetings and also establish early who the project leader was, either in our organization, but more importantly, in the tech partner, having that single face that you're going to see for a long period, and that person was, I think, super important to get right off the bat to begin building that sort of connection and click. And also we were keen to ensure that the team met the technology partner as quickly as possible. So again, they came over from the UK. They had a chat with the team about what we're going to do and how we're going to begin to work together to get again buy-in from the team. It wasn't just okay, we've made this decision, we'll come back in a couple of months with your new tool and that's it, so to speak. And then I think finally it was also, once we'd kind of done that, was to get down and also start their sort of onboarding with the organization and our requirements. So we kind of went back over the kind of requirements to kind of make sure that it was reestablished, because obviously the tender process, you're still one bit of removed, so to speak. Now you're kind of in together. It was really useful because we could continue the process of them learning who FEMS as an organization is, but we also found that there was a few things that they had assumed based on what we talked about that weren't, when we were discussing it face to face over a period of time, it wasn't quite what that was. So I think those things we kind of wanted to do within the first few weeks of agreeing to it, that I think set us on a good road for working together long term.
No, fantastic. And actually, I think that, which then follows on nicely from that, really, your point about sort of assumptions maybe that they'd made. Is there any advice that you would give around managing the relationship with the partner? Because as you say, if maybe they've assumed something but it's not correct, how to kind of tell them it's not correct. So any advice that you have on managing the partner?
Yeah, I think that really is. So we kind of it's really useful to have kind of meetings from the get-go, not just in terms of, okay, this individual is going to be the lead, this is going to be the timeline. We had, I think, one or two meetings where all the tech partner was doing was almost doing a mini version of the requirements gathering exercise, because we both wanted to sort of revalidate the requirements and each tech partner will have a slightly different definition, terminology, how they've thought about it, and you'll only see that so much in the engagement or the demonstration. So we kind of organised a couple of meetings where they were meeting face to face with the team, and again, all they were basically doing was, right, okay, we were thinking based on your requirements. We were thinking X, Y, and Z, and kind of demonstrating what they thought the problems were and what they thought the solutions were. I think that was so helpful. It sort of killed two birds with one stone. It was a sort of meeting with the team, getting to know them, us getting to know them and how they worked, but it also fleshed out a lot of things where, no, it wasn't quite what we were meaning there, or it's a bit more complicated than that, because that I think stood us in really good stead when it came to, okay, they've given you a timeline, they've given you cost, they've given you a features thing, but after that you can flesh out and it can harden up the actual timeline and actual cost based on the real live data, and also many of our it takes time, so your requirements may have even changed slightly since between your tendering and then. So it's really good for them to kind of, as a tech partner, be plugged in to your organization from the get-go, because as you say, they're wanting to provide as much bang for your buck as possible. They can only do that if you both can work together so that they get really up to speed with you as a company.
Yeah, I mean, so many great points in there, Cameron. God, I could talk to you about it all day. I think definitely one of the really good ones for me there is it's that point about the discovery phase versus the requirements document, because as you said, people often presume, well, the requirements document is that has everything in it and we don't need to do this process again. But absolutely you do. The technology partner has to carry out discovery to make sure that you're very clear, they're very clear, so that they can then put together the final scope that you're going to sign off for build. So it's a really, really valid point, because I think a lot of people, they don't really realize that. They kind of think if a partner says, now we're going to do discovery, they think, well, why? So I think that's a really, really good point to highlight. So then finally, before we move on to, we've had lots of questions come in, before we move on to the questions, any take-home advice you would give to any organizations thinking about embarking on a project like this?
I think it's I think the main thing that I think we learned was to be really upfront and honest that it will take time. It will take time to think of the requirements, the tender, taking time out for them to engage with you. The whole thing will take time, but I think it's really worthwhile. It's worthwhile doing and taking that time, and really taking time to look at your requirements from different angles, taking the time to do those discovery sessions, because the more knowledge that you can the more foresight that you can take to think in your requirements, and the more knowledge that you can give your tech partner about you as an organization, will speed that process up in the long term. And I think another thing is that the other factors, as we say, rather than cost, do really matter, and they will be different from different organizations. But what really surprised us was the approach to delivery became the really important thing. It wasn't the overriding factor. Obviously, cost and the other things had priority as well, but it was an unexpected one to say, hang on a second, it is going to be a long-term partnership, and the build that you'll get at the end will only be as good as the information that you work on together and that relationship. So I think it's those two things. It's acknowledge the fact that it's gonna take time, but also that time that you take is really going to benefit in the end if you find a person that fits you as an organization. And it can be so easy to say, oh, find somebody that fits, but it's such an important thing, and it sometimes is quite hard to, you can't score that fit.
Mm-hmm.
All you can do really is is get your requirements really well and plan in spaces that you can meet them face to face, and you can basically see how they work and how they operate.
Oh, fantastic. And I mean, I really love your comment about it's only as good as the information you can give them. I think that's a really, really valid point. Again, people kind of think the pressure is all on the technology partner for them to be telling you and selling to you, but you have a very important role in this. You have to give as much to them as they're going to give to you. And I think that's a really great summary. So I'm going to move on to some questions. We've had quite a few in. So one of the ones is, I think quite an interesting one, did you consult some members in the process of requirements gathering?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, we did. So we kind of engaged that the member society, the membership at the right from the start. So from the board of directors, basically the board of directors, we then obviously came up with some sort of high level essential priorities. And what we basically did was it was quite handy. We have an annual meeting of all our member societies that was happily coming up. So we kind of used one of the sessions there to kind of explore, where we kind of basically gave what the issues that we'd found were, and what our sort of high level priorities were going to be. And we were basically just really it was really open and honest in the sense of what can these tools, what can we basically almost include in these tools that would support you. One of the main things, the reasons that we were doing it is because we felt that we weren't giving enough features or benefits to our member societies. We kind of kept it at that level. So we weren't going down into the, okay, right, can we give you help you with membership onboarding, or can we give you a website and all that?
Yeah.
It wasn't that per se, but it was to kind of get them again in from the start, and really it was really about the sort of core wants, and the kind of core wants that came out of that were really we'd really appreciate it if we had the online portal basically that we talked about really came from that discussion, because we basically found that a delegate from a member society was saying, I have tons of different ideas or news that I'd like to share with other colleagues here, but the only way I can do that now is if I give it to you and then you give it to the thing. We really need a space where we can kind of collaborate and connect together. That kind of came out of that thing, and that made that priority, which was very much a CRM website, yeah, and then an online portal if we want to do it. But that kind of hardened that as a priority based on those discussions.
No, yeah, that's really useful, because I know it's a debate that comes up often a lot. You say, do we involve the membership or supporters or things like that? So it's interesting, and to say that, yeah, for you it was definitely useful as not to get into the nuts and bolts of the requirements, but that overarching piece about sort of matching the strategy and what they need then against the requirements. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Another question was, did the tender responses vary wildly on cost, and what criteria did you adopt? Culture, fit, function of technology, timelines, etc. So yeah, were they wildly varied on kind of cost and responses? What do they look like?
That's a good question. There was extremes, shall we say. I wouldn't say that they varied wildly, but there was a definite difference in the sort of criteria that we came up with. So we kind of wanted a set of criteria that we were going to use to, we didn't really score them per se, but we kind of had a sort of red, amber, green approach to it. And that started from, we wanted a consistent set of criteria that when the ITT responses came in, we were kind of scoring them, for want of a better expression, on the stuff that came in, but we were also scoring them or rating them, for want of expression, in terms of when we met them and the demos, so to speak. So that way we found quite good. And I think the main things that we were scoring were, yeah, the features, how well they match the requirements, approaches, timelines, cost, obviously, experience in our area, any governance or reference, not issues per se, but some of them there were some ones that were maybe American based that might have question marks on data protection thing. It was useful to do that from the start and also actually see it change, because some technology partners, or what we found, their ITT, the response, great, perfect, slick. It was all there. And then when we had the engagement meetings and the demo meetings, some of them were very much like, this is what we build. Well, you give us the information, we'll build it, we'll give it to you. Anything extra is an optional cost. And that will work for some organizations if you have that priority mix differently. So for us, the costs were within acceptable limits, but you could also see a difference in, as you were saying, some were very much, this is the package, you're going to get this, that's it. And then some were really keen on, yeah, there's a I think we were surprised, some that you thought, whoa, that's a high price. In actual fact, it was more the sort of mentality of the company. So it wasn't, here, this will do everything. It was you could start low and do these things in phase one, and then these ones you could phase in over time, which then meant that the cost overall was going to be slightly higher. And I think what was a really good thing that we did was not just do cost as in terms of the one, how much is it to build it, but we also wanted them to cost what the running cost was. And then I think we did a sort of what the cost would be in total for 5 years. So that's the build cost plus that, because it was very easy for us to say, we have this project budget, that's fine. But making sure that we knew quite soon from the start, okay, it's easy to say that, all right, obviously there's going to be running costs and all that, but it's useful to get that from the start, because, yeah, board of directors or senior management might think, well, you've built it, it's like subscribing to MailChimp or something like that, it's a fixed cost, surely. But bearing that in mind, so there's more than just the cost, that's just to get it to build, and that for us also did have an effect on the choice that we made of tech partner.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. Looking at that sort of 5-year view, because it's not just the cost of getting to go live. There's so many more, the support costs, all the things, as you say, as well. Conscious of time, so we've probably got time for one maybe other question. How much time should we allocate to the requirements gathering exercise? This is always an interesting one, because there's varying opinions of, some people say that, it should just be really short meetings. Others people say it should be endless days and days and days. Having gone through it, I suppose I'd also kind of go, having gone through it, do you think you allocated enough time? Would you change anything that you did? So yeah, kind of your thoughts on the time taken, because it's always a hotly debated one.
Yeah, and I think yeah, and that's a good question, because I think so we're quite a small team, so there's only like 10 of us, so to speak. So for us, obviously, it was easy to an extent to involve all members of the team. Bigger organizations, you'd have to cut your cloth accordingly. What I would say is, if it had just been a short, sharp set of meetings, or even if we'd only the requirements gathering section and meeting the tech partner, if they'd only been one meeting with the team, I don't think we would have teased out as much. I think we'd have set ourselves up for more down the road. It's been built to a standard because it says, you said that on the one meeting that we had, or you said that on your the requirement section. I think the big thing that we took away was, yeah, it's very easy to say what you think you require, but you actually really need somebody, an external person or the tech partner to work with you to kind of say, tease that out. Is that really your requirement? And it's so hard, I think, to do that. I know I was going into meetings going like, should be fairly easy. This is quite a small thing. We've got these X, Y, and Z requirements, and coming out of like the first meeting thinking I've just scratched the surface of these things. And I think having that feeling and going through that, in our opinion, as hard, as long as that was, I think for the requirements gathering, I think we took like a month or two or something like that of just several meetings, or if we found one that was a team that was quite, we'd basically ran out of time, we'd schedule in a couple of more, because I think we really wanted to drill down to the base of things rather than just taking that right, we've done one meeting, you've got an hour to tell us your requirements, so to speak. So I would be more in the sort of like make sure that you've allocated plenty of time, and also know that you could go ad infinitum, but I think there's a balance between, there's a sweet spot between having just a short, sharp thing because timelines are running, and taking too long. So for us, it was a month or two to do the requirement thing, involving as many of the team as possible.
No, fantastic. And I think it's always a tricky one, isn't it? As you say, it's that balance, because you could spend forever on requirements gathering. But I think your point as well about sort of challenging the requirements, really taking that kind of external view, or even it can be somebody internally trying to take the external view, to very much challenge people and to understand, well, why are you saying we need this, and not just taking it as somebody said it, so therefore they're going to get it. I think that's the really important bit, that when you get to the end of the requirements, you can say, this is actually what we need, rather than this is what people would like to have, but actually we're not really sure it'll give us the benefits that we want at the end of it.
Exactly.
Perfect. So conscious of time, so I'm not going to bring in any of the other questions, but I know, Cameron, as you said, you're very happy for people to contact you afterwards. So I just really wanted to wrap up by saying thank you so much, Cameron. That has been absolutely fantastic. So many insights and some really, really good points, and I could happily talk to you all day about them. But I think for me that the big takeaways is really around that, bringing the staff in, going through that process, really being open and honest with your partners, and to your point about when you're looking at the shortlist of the potential technology partners, not limiting yourself at an early stage, because as you say, you might not have seen or even approached the partner that you ultimately went with. So there's about that again, your balance between, even when talking requirements, is not limiting yourself too much, but then also being realistic. Look, you can't go out to market and look at 15 different technology partners. That just wouldn't be viable, or things like that. So thank you so much for joining us today, Cameron, and obviously for everybody else joining us. I hope that was useful, and hopefully we'll see you all again soon on another session. Thank you again, Cameron.
Great to talk. Thank you.
Thank you.